Welcome to the Module 3 live session. We are moving into new ethical theories. We are going to start out with one of our ancient Greek philosophers, looking at Aristotle's virtue ethics and character. And then we're going to head east and we're going to look at Buddhist ethics. There's a lot of similarities between Aristotle's virtue ethics and Buddhism. Namely, they're focused on character. So Aristotle is one of the three ancient Greek philosophers you can remember with an acronym known as SAP: Socrates, Aristotle, and Plato. So Socrates came first. He lived in 500 BC. He taught Plato. Plato wrote a lot of his philosophies down in books. He actually started a school also. And then Plato then taught Aristotle, and Aristotle also wrote a lot of books. One of them was called the Nicomachean Ethics, named after his son. And the basis of Aristotle's moral theory is found in the Nicomachean Ethics. And Aristotle also started a school. And in the Middle Ages, which would be like around maybe 500 AD, he became known as the philosopher. So Aristotle is probably considered one of the most important philosophers in Western history. Virtue ethics rejects the ethics approach that we learned last week by Kant. It rejects the duty-based ethics approach, and it also rejects consequentialism, which would include the utilitarianism. So virtue ethics has its own set of principles rejecting these other theories. What are the objectives of Aristotle's virtue ethics? Well, one is to explain the basic ideas of a virtue-based ethical theory. We're going to describe Aristotle's ethical theory. We're going to give examples of what it means to be a good person according to Aristotle. So notice that the focus on deontological ethics and utilitarianism was the act. According to Aristotle, the focus is on the person. Is a person virtuous? We're also going to explain Aristotle's notion of friendship and virtue. Aristotle wrote a great deal about how to live a good life. Happiness was an important feature in his ethics, but not the same way that a utilitarian would consider it. For Aristotle, happiness was human flourishing, each person being the best person they could possibly be. And to do this, he believes one needs to be virtuous. So in this module 3 discussion forum, we're looking back as if we've lived 99 years, and we're reflecting on the moments where we felt the happiest, and we're talking about human flourishing and virtuous behavior, and looking at whether or not that virtuous behavior helped us be happy and to flourish more. Aristotle believed that many virtues and vices are at play within one's interaction with his or her friends. So we're going to start looking at Aristotle's 3 levels of friendship. The first one is what he calls utility or usefulness. It's a very shallow level of friendship. Many would describe a relationship such as an acquaintance or even a business connection. It'd be the type of relationship you have with your favorite cashier, your favorite barista at the coffee shop, somebody that you do business with, maybe the mailman. And once that usefulness is gone, so is that relationship. Does anyone have a friendship that would fall into this category of utility or usefulness? Can you think of someone, Jenny, in your life that falls into this shallow level of friendship?
I would think like through work, working with case managers and guardians, it's just that friendly level and you just kind of get what you need from each other.
Exactly. And I used to talk to a cashier at Target, but now I don't go to that Target anymore. So there goes that sort of friendship. Um, A lot of people go to Starbucks and they sit around and they chit chat, and they may really like one of the baristas at Starbucks, but if you start going to a different Starbucks, there goes your friendship with that barista. That kind of sort of a shallow level of friendship. So the second level of Aristotle's friendship is a little bit deeper. It's for pleasure or enjoyment. You enjoy the company of the other person, and they also enjoy your company. With this level of friendship, you share mutual interests. This would be a friend that you like to maybe play cards with, go to the movies with, go to the concert with, sporting events. Many of the relationships considered pleasure friendships, many of our relationships in contemporary society would fall into this category. I think it's the people that I've met at work. We might get together and go bowling after work. I enjoy their company, and it's a great way to socialize. I used to have a friend at work. We used to go on Friday nights, we'd go out to a restaurant, maybe like check out a Chinese buffet. And it wasn't the deepest level of friendship, but it was for, enjoyment. I've had other coworkers that I went to baseball games with. If they had an extra ticket to, see the Rockies or the baseball team, we'd go together. Can you think of anyone, Barbara, in your life that may fall into the second category of friendship for pleasure or enjoyment?
Um, I'm one of them that when I get into a relationship, even my friends, they all deep. I mean, I don't, I used to maybe years back had some friends that I don't see that were like that from work, but the majority like tight still. We do everything still together when we can, but I don't have many people that's in this category.
I know what you mean. Certainly, as
Yeah,
I've gotten older, the friends in the first two categories kind of drop off.
right. Yeah, I don't have. Yeah, it's
Good.
mine are that last one.
What kind is that?
I call it true friendship because we've been friends. Some of us, I have one friend, my sister. Oh well, she's like a sister. Today she turned 60. We've been friends since she was 8, and
Aw.
so we've been. So it's like we went to school together, and we still. And I have a friend from high school. I know she's in her 60s also, but we've been friends that long. I mean, through thick and thin, through everything. So yeah, that last one, true friendship, I call it.
Yes, Aristotle believed that a true friendship is based on a mutual well-being and that these are very rare. A true friendship has some of the elements of the other two types of friendship, but that foundation is different. Each friend enjoys the other person's company and their character. The well-being of the friend might even take priority over your own well-being. One's awareness goes beyond his or herself. True friendship aids in your ability to reach happiness because the friend encourages you to be a better, more virtuous person. When I think of true friendship, I think of the trust, the honesty, which you don't have to have in those lower levels of friendship. There's not always trust, there's not always honesty. And again, like when your true friend hurts, you hurt because their well-being is a priority for you. And for Aristotle, that's what makes it really virtuous, is really caring for another person more so than for yourself. And Aristotle believes that while good people can have the first two types of friendship with bad people, that only truly virtuous people can enjoy a true friendship because only truly good people are able to care for others, for the sake of that person, putting one person's needs above your own, even, and that true friendship is rare. Do you agree with Aristotle, Jenny? Do you think that true friendship can only occur between two virtuous people?
No, I think true friendship can be among many people. That's why you have a group of friends.
Yeah, I mean, the example that we're always given is suppose, Joe is one of your friends and Joe goes and robs a bank and Joe wants to come to your house and hide. Would you help Joe?
No, we're friends, but we're not that good of friends.
Yeah, and that's why Aristotle says that highest level of friendship can only occur between two truly good people, right?
Even that good of a friendship, I don't think I could do that.
Yeah, certainly the only time I would be hiding criminal behavior would have to be a blood relative, right? Like a son, daughter. I don't know why I thought about this, but I went back to in my mind, I went back to the 1996 case of John Ramsey. Do you all remember the case of John Ramsey out of Boulder, Colorado? She was a 5-year-old beauty queen who had won all these beauty pageants, and she ended up missing, right? And she was found dead in her parents' basement um, the day after Christmas. And the question is, well, who did it? Do you remember that case, John Ramsey?
I do, and it's still unsolved.
It is still unsolved, and and I moved to Colorado in '99. So, every now and then I think back on that case, and I've done a lot of research into it, and I believe that her father did it, and that her mother covered it up. And again, why would her mother cover that up? You know, the only reason she would cover that up would be to protect her husband, right? Or someone that you love. Because statistically, if somebody dies in a house, right, and no one's been in the house except for 4 family members, mother, father, son, daughter, if the daughter dies, one of those other 3 people killed her, right? I mean, what do you think happened, Jenny?
I always leaned more towards the mom. Even with the handwriting samples, hers was the only one that was inconclusive and inconsistent. Like they were able to rule out the dad, the brother was too young. Um, so I don't know, just something about the mom just struck me as suspicious.
Yeah, she's one of the most likely people to have done it. Either her or the husband. The son was too young. He was, and then for 100%, she wrote the ransom letter, right? The ransom letter, specified a certain amount, which was the amount of her husband's bonus. A handwriting expert in Virginia looked it over and said, "That's Patsy Ramsey's handwriting." I believe that she wrote that letter. And
Yeah,
then
and they did the writing analysis and hers just came back inconclusive. Like it differed too many times. They couldn't pin it directly on her. Um, but yeah, I was something just always struck me as she was the one. Like something just something was off about the dad. I really leaned towards the mom doing it.
Yes, they are the two most, statistically, they are the ones that have the highest likelihood of doing it. And the reason that I decided that the father is probably the one who did it is because what is the motive, And sadly it turns out that a lot of these beauty, pageant young women are being sexually abused. And the only person that would have a motive for that would be the father. And looking statistically at what usually occurs, and it's a sad reality, but in the criminal sense, he's the only one that would have a motive to commit a sexual assault and murder because JonBenet Ramsey was sexually assaulted. So I believe that his wife, Patsy, helped him cover it up by writing that letter and, maybe mixing up some of the evidence in the house to why? Because she would protect her husband, right? You don't want to lose your husband and your daughter. You've already lost your daughter. You don't want to lose your husband too. So, you know, um, and it makes me think about the type of relationship you would have if you were to cover up a crime for someone that would probably be, a very, very close friend or relative. So yeah, it was a terrible case, and all too common. You know, all these cases on forensic files and a lot of these other criminal reenactments are, acts of violence against women. And the motive is usually some type of sexual assault. And the murder is to cover up the evidence, destroy the evidence of the sexual assault, and make it so that the woman or child who's been sexually assaulted cannot testify, right, against the assailant, the predator. So that's a very common occurrence in the criminal law realm. But again, it goes back to this notion of trust and other the closeness of certain relationships, and of course, in my opinion anyway, sexual assault and murder are not not very virtuous acts. But yeah, it is strange that to this day, it's still an open case. Nobody knows who did it because the cover up was just so good. Moving on. Anyway, virtue ethics. Virtue, according to Aristotle, virtue is a moral conduct that emanates from a person's moral character, not from any obedience to moral laws. Kant believed that virtue was obedience to moral laws, but Aristotle does not believe that. For him, it's what type of person should I be? Aristotle says we should be virtuous. We should have a stable disposition to act and feel according to some ideal or model of excellence. And virtue for Aristotle is a deeply embedded character trait. So what are the moral virtues? We're going to be looking at that in your Module 3 assignment, which is going to ask you to create a help wanted ad for a job and to list the 5 moral virtues that an ideal job applicant would have. So some of the moral virtues might be fairness, benevolence, honesty, loyalty, conscientiousness, and courage. And, looking at this theory of virtue ethics, it makes me think about the time in which it was written, maybe 200 BC, because I look at society now. Jenny, do you see those type of virtues overall in this society? I mean, when you look at TV, the news, and the social media, does it represent an adherence to those moral virtues?
Far from it. Very far from it.
Exactly. So I think most people would look at society today, especially, those of us who are in college, aware of things, trying to be educated. Certainly, there seems to be a problem with our moral compass, a problem raising children to be moral, just a problem of reflecting this type of morality in the real world, right? And we know the media, of course, is very focused on the negative. I truly believe that there are wonderful, virtuous people and great things going on every day. But the media right now is not focused on that. They choose to focus on things that are very negative and really emphasize the negativity and the news. When I'm watching the news, I always think, hey, they could have a program about Little League after school programs. They could have a program about after school ballet. They could have a program about all of the great teachers and celebrating teachers who have won awards. I mean, there's so many different positive programs that could be on TV, but instead they choose to focus on things that are very negative. So it is very difficult to apply Aristotle's virtue ethics to modern society. But of course, he lived in ancient Greece, and Aristotle again is a philosopher thinking about the ideal person and the ideal virtues. For Aristotle, virtues came about as a result of habit, that we become just by doing just things, temperate by doing temperate acts, and that we become brave by doing brave acts. So for him, it becomes very habitual. Do you agree with that, Barbara? Do you think that that virtue comes out of us behaving virtuously as a matter of habit, that we get into the habit of doing things right, I guess, instead of doing things wrong?
To a point, yes, I do, because I look at myself, I think about, why do I do certain things? And not because someone telling me to do it, or someone's watching me, but because I know it's the right thing. Like, this is one personally that I used to tell my Sunday school class, um, how how do you feel when you go to bed at night and you have to get up and go to the bathroom? Are you one that will wash your hands before you go and get back into bed, or you just get back into bed? Okay, no one I know. So, and I always tell myself, well, I always think about, well, I want my hands clean, so I'm gonna wash them, no matter if someone's watching or not. And it's just those little things that, I mean, you gotta want to have it in within you, I believe.
I agree with that completely. And that we're not getting into detail about Plato. He is the person who taught Aristotle. Plato believed that that moral behavior and virtue was also innate, that it was an innate thing within us. And I agree with you. I think, people like you and I who do have a very strong sense of morality and integrity and honesty and truth, I believe that that's innate. And I think it's wonderful that you're teaching your son that, because I'm one of those people that also washes my hands at least 20 times a day. I'm just like, every time I do anything, if I go outside and get the mail and I come back in the house, I'm washing my hands with antibacterial. So I was doing that even before the pandemic. When I go to restaurants and they're making my food, I'm always like, can you wash your hands first? And I've even been in restaurants where they're like, wow, thank you for telling me that, because I had forgotten. And I'm like, I know you had forgotten. That's why I reminded you before you make my food, you'd better wash your hands. You know, I am a bit of a germaphobe, but that's just one of the aspects of my own sense of morality. Cleanliness is like godliness, as they say. But yeah, I've always had a very strong innate sense of morality, wanting to do the right thing. I even put that in my response to the Module 3 discussion forum, was my own focus on charity. I've done a lot of charitable work, a lot of donating, a lot of giving. And for me, that's just, I like doing it. I want to be ethical no matter who's watching, because that's an innate character that is in me, a belief in justice, fairness, benevolence, honesty. That's just an innate thing within me. We used to have this sign up at work that just said, do the right thing even if no one is watching. It's just like wash your hands even if no one's watching. I like doing the right thing for me, because that's what feels right to me. It feels right to me to give, to be generous. I have several food banks that I donate to. And I just, that to me, that seems like just the right thing. Inside of me, it seems really like the thing that I want to do. And the more I do it, I've just gotten into the habit of always volunteering, always agreeing to give, always being the one who's, yeah, I'll go out and do, the next breast cancer walk. I'll go out and do the next civic event. I'll volunteer for that. I was just so used to doing that for a long time, until I realized, I'm like, you know what? I'm just overdoing this. So for a while, I got to the point where I'm like, I'm not going to agree to do any more charity walks, any more charity events. I'm not going to donate to anything else. But for me, it did really become a matter of habit, of just like, oh yeah, I've got to give. If I can give, if I can donate, if I can help, I've got to do that. And it's not for anybody else. It's just for me, my own sense of virtue. Any other comments or thoughts about that? I find truth in a lot of these different theories. I don't think that one theory has to be all right or all wrong. I think that these different theories have their own application, to different circumstances and different situations. But I do see the merit in virtue ethics. One thing that a theory that Aristotle developed is the idea of human beings being teleological. And that is that we have a purpose toward which we naturally aim. For Aristotle, every living being has an end. Life is teleological, which means we're not just floating in the cosmos, but we aspire to something. We have goals, right? That we're going in a direction, especially, again, those of us who are driven to get our education, driven to be better at our jobs, driven to make more money, driven to want a better life for our family. And that's what Aristotle says. It's like, look, we're actually driven toward a goal, that human beings act toward an end. Um, why do you think it's so important, Jenny, for human beings to be teleological? Why is it important for us to set goals and to move in a direction?
Because I think it gives us something always to aspire to. You know, when I was growing up, my parents taught me, you know, their value of ethics and to do better. You know, it's just, you know, I want you to do better than I did. If I had children, I would want them to do better than I did. It's just, it's a forward progressing motion constantly.
Yes, I completely agree with you, and that's certainly how my parents were. They were both more or less, raised in a single parent situation. They had lost one parent and they were raised by one parent. So for them, they always wanted to be married, to be together, and to raise their kids together the right way. And that's exactly what they did, so that their kids would have more than they did, more education, more opportunities, more material wealth than they did. And it was that belief in doing things better. And now we're just in a point of society where things are just changing so much, because we know now that today's youth may not necessarily do better than their parents. They may do worse than their parents. They may have they're less likely to become homeowners. They're less likely to be married. Today the majority of the people are single. So a lot of that, that notion has really changed, and I think it's to the detriment of society. The idea that kids will be worse off than their parents, I don't think that's good. Um, but at least for all of us who are still goal driven, I mean, I just think about school. And when you decide to go to school, how you have to set up, goals for yourself. You decide, about financial aid, and you start working toward your degree, and you start thinking about your career path, and then you start thinking about your classes and your credit hours and your homework, and it gives you a purpose. That's what I always felt like when I was in school, is that I had a purpose, and I think it's very important, especially, for youth to stay in school and have a purpose, because as long as you have those goals, you have something to work toward. And I think again, today's youth, if they don't have a purpose like that, if they're not working toward achieving something, for me, when I was in school, it was like, okay, I need to get good grades so that I can go to college. And then that was my purpose. And then when I graduated high school, it was like, okay, I have to go to college and I need to get good grades so I can graduate, and then I need to do this so that I can get to the next level. And it was so important for me to stay in school, because that kept me focused, kept me grounded, kept me out of trouble. You can't do well in school if you're out, getting involved in gangs and drinking and destruction of property and all this bad stuff, right? I can't do that because I have a goal and I'm on a path. And I think it's that that it's so important for youth to have parents and teachers to really encourage them to set those goals, because you can see what happens today if youth are just listening to their friends, and their friends like, let's just go after school today and drink behind the bleachers and smoke, or let's just go, destroy and vandalize some property. And again, if kids start associating with bad friends, what happens to that juvenile, Jenny? If juveniles start hanging out with other bad juvenile delinquents, and they start listening to what their friends tell them to do and not what their parents tell them to do, what do you think happens in that situation, Barbara, Jenny? Either one of you can comment.
Oh, it depends on the kid. Either they are followers and they follow along with what their friends do, you know, with the bad behavior, or they stick to what they were taught and they don't do those things. I was the kid that no matter what my friends did, I didn't, you know, it was one of those situations where if your friends jumped off a bridge, would you jump too? You know, I was the one that would, no, I would stand and watch them jump and go, you guys are stupid. Um, but I mean, I think it all depends on the kid. Peer pressure is a thing, but at the same time, they're able to make their own choices too.
Excellent point. I just, what do you think, Barbara?
Agree with Miss Jenny. I agree with what she said. I work with 1 year olds and 2 year olds, and when they do something, they see one person do something. The lead teacher and myself, we always talk to them and say, "Hey, be your own person. You don't have to do that just because doing that. Be who you are. You be your own person. You don't have to follow them." And and I think if we start telling them that at a young age, hopefully, because so many children are so easily to follow behind someone else, and they don't even know why. Like, and then of course down the road end up in trouble because they're all followers instead of trying to be your own person and lead your own. So I agree with.
Great. Those are really great thoughts. And, I can only look to my own life as an example. My parents taught me right from wrong at a very young age. We were always taught in our family, do not do drugs, period. So, when I got to that stage, being a teenager or in my 20s, when I heard about people doing drugs, that message was already firmly planted in my brain by someone I trusted, my parents, my father. We were told, don't hitchhike. Don't pick up hitchhikers. If somebody comes to the door that you don't know, don't open the door. These are just things that were taught to me at a very young age. And I had a good relationship with my parents, so I believed them. So if somebody else came along later and told me to do something, I'd be like, no, I was already taught that drugs are bad, that they're bad on your body. And I really think you have to get that message at an early age from someone you trust, and then you will stick with that when the peer pressure comes along. The peer pressure, the message I'm getting from my peers is not nearly as strong as the one that I got from my own parents, who I trust more because I have a better relationship with them. So, again, for me, things like that, drugs, no temptation, because I know they're bad for you. So it
Well,
doesn't matter.
well, I was thinking the same thing, but for me too, it was, the thought of the repercussions of, okay, if I, smoke pot with my friends and my parents find out, what's going to happen then? So, for me, it wasn't just that, it was the repercussions of getting caught doing that, which is why I never did that as a kid either.
Good. Yes. Actions have consequences. And that's another thing that has to be brought back in this society, because we see people all the time now engaging in wrongful conduct that does not have consequences. Again, when I was a kid, if we came home late at night, that action had a consequence, right? You have to be home before dark. When the street lights come on, you better be at home. And that action, and a bad action had a bad consequence. So, but yeah, we see that these days, kids, adults doing all of this wrongful conduct and somehow no consequence, right? So yeah, that has to actions have to have consequences, and that's how you teach people. That's a motivator for good behavior. If I do something good, I get a reward. If I do something bad, I get punished. I do not want to be punished, right? So I do something good. Okay, great. I think we all have a pretty good understanding of virtue ethics. Let's get a little more into it. So eudaimonia is the Greek word for happiness and flourishing. Aristotle believed that the true goal of human beings was actually to achieve eudaimonia, which is this ideal sense of happiness and flourishing and the realization of the good life. To achieve eudaimonia, human beings must fulfill that function which is natural and distinctive to them. And for Aristotle, it's to live fully in accordance with reason. And that conclusion always struck me as odd, because here he is talking about happiness and flourishing, and then he says, but ultimately, the only way we can achieve eudaimonia is to live fully in accordance with reason. And then I thought about that more. He is a philosopher. And, what does he mean by reason? Well, the golden mean, Aristotle's notion of a moral virtue, is the golden mean, which is a balance between two behavioral extremes. On one end would be a deficit, cowardice. On the other extreme is someone who is foolhardy or a bully. And in the middle is courage, right? For somebody, gluttony might be on one end, starvation on the other, and the other one is, just eating enough food to be satisfied. So for Aristotle, the way we can truly achieve eudaimonia and happiness is that life of moderation. Through reason, we figure out what the golden mean is, how to have a balance between the two behavioral extremes. So do you agree with that idea, Jenny, of the golden mean as being really the ideal?
It makes sense. I mean, it floats, so I don't know.
It does. It seems very rational. You don't want to have too much of something, and you don't want to have a lack. You want to have the right amount. And then I think of celebrities, and for some reason, Whitney Houston always comes to mind as a person who had too much, right? If you have too much money, then what do you do with it? And for some people, that might mean buy just a ton of drugs. And that happens to a lot of celebrities and even some professional athletes. They've never had money in their life, and then they get offered, some $10 million contract. And what do? They just blow all that and start having all these booking all these jets and Lear jets and having all their family and friends on them and going to these wild parties and spending tons and tons of money on drugs because they have too much money. Robin Williams used to say that. He used to say that cocaine is God's way of telling you make too much money. So, for those of us who don't make that much money, I don't have to worry about a cocaine addiction. I would never use cocaine, one, and two, I don't have that kind of money to throw away, right? I think it was one of the Bee Gees brothers. It was Andy Gibb, the younger one. He was spending $10,000 a day on cocaine, and he eventually died because it was rotting away his stomach. Um, but yeah, I don't have $10,000 a day that I could throw away on drugs. So I do think that having too much money could be a problem. Have you heard of those people who win the lottery and the next thing you know, all their friends and people come out of the woodwork, say, I need money for this. Hey, I need money for that. I need money for this. And then all of a sudden they're miserable. And then there have even been situations where I know a man won the lottery and his family killed him for the money while he was asleep. So I could see situations where excess of money could be a problem. It could be deadly.
That's why you claim it anonymously. Don't tell
Yeah.
anybody you want it.
You're right.
You gonna have cousins you ain't know you had.
Exactly. Yeah, if I won it, I would do what Jenny said. I would, first of all, I wouldn't tell anybody. Two, I wouldn't just be giving it randomly to people. I would give a tiny bit to charity, and then I would invest the rest. I would spend a very small amount, maybe buy a new car, and then that would invest the rest. I would help one or two charities, and that's it. I would not start throwing money at all my relatives. Mm-mm. Yeah, but when I heard the case of the man who hit the lottery and his family killed him while he was asleep, again, they have no morality, right? How much do they love their father? How much did his wife love him? That telling her kids, okay, well, as soon as dad's asleep, we're going to kill him and we're going to take that lottery money. Okay, yeah, that's perfect. Awful. Some people have no morals. There is no amount of money that I would kill for. There just isn't. One of the criticisms of virtue ethics, when we look at all these moral theories, we want to look at the criticisms afterwards. Like we looked at the weaknesses of relativism, of cultural relativism, the weaknesses. We're going to look at the weaknesses of virtue ethics. One of the most obvious ones is it doesn't really tell you how you should act. If you were at work trying to resolve a dilemma about, say, fair pay, right? Fair pay is a huge issue right now because historically women have not been getting paid the same amount as men, even though they're doing the same jobs. Now that wage gap has closed, but it's still an issue. People of color are not getting paid the same amount as white men, even though they're doing the same job. So if you are in, say, a workplace meeting where you want to try to resolve the wage gap, if you believe in virtue ethics, what would you do, Barbara? You're at work coming up with a policy to end the wage gap, right? And you're sitting on a committee of people whose job, okay, what can we do to end the wage gap? And you believe in virtue ethics. Does it really show you a solution?
Not really. I mean, no, I don't. Oh, because it. No, I'm thinking about
Yeah.
my own self with work where I've dealt with that for years, and it's like, no, you hear the people over here, you know they making this much money, and you over here making pennies, as you could say, and it's like, well, how that's fair? And I do what they do and some, and then here you hear that, so I would say no.
Yeah, you could be a virtuous person and but appeals to virtue without a reference to principles of duty will not give us any guidance in what to do, right? One way that you could approach that is if you believe in duty based ethics is where you would look at the law. Okay, the Equal Pay Act was passed in 1963. And Obama passed another version of it in 2009. Here we are in 2022, and we still don't have pay equity, right? And so appeals to, because I think someone could truly be virtuous, right? There might be somebody who's virtuous, but they still pay the man more than the woman. Historically, it was a thing, well, the man is the breadwinner. That's how it was at one point. The mother stayed home and raised the kids. The man's the breadwinner. So they would think, oh, well, he has a family to raise. He needs more money. Well, we know society is not like that anymore. Now the wife is the breadwinner and raises the kids and cooks the dinner and cleans the house. So there is no justification for paying the man more. These days, he may not even be around to raise his kids or even pay child support. So there's no more moral justification for paying men more than women. In fact, looking at the law says you have to pay people the same regardless of their race, gender, age, blah, blah, blah. But for some reason, we're having a hard time getting companies to actually do that. And appealing to virtue ethics, I don't think will help you solve a workplace dilemma unless you're looking at some other moral theory, maybe like utilitarianism. That might help you solve a problem. You would weigh your pros and your cons and come up with a solution that has the best consequences. Maybe, say, well, from here on out, we're going to pay everybody the same and we're going to make wages more transparent. And why are we going to do that? To avoid lawsuits. So you could pick a course of action that has the best consequences. That would be looking at utilitarianism. But I don't think that in certain situations, virtue ethics tells you how to act. Here's an example. Dr. Green may be totally benevolent, but he doesn't know if stem cell research should be continued or if he should stop life support for a terminally ill patient. So we've seen, people who are on life support, and a doctor may be very virtuous. Should he stop life support or continue it? What do you think, Jenny?
I think in a situation like that, it comes down to what the patient wants.
And if the patient's unconscious because they're on life support,
They're next of kin.
yeah, and that's the law, right? That's looking at duty-based ethics. So again, virtue ethics may not really tell anybody what to do, So that's a weakness. We may have to apply another moral theory to give us some guidance on what we should do. And certainly in a lot of medical situations, we're going to start looking at their patients' rights, the rights of families, who has the power of attorney, we're going to have to look at something else besides virtue ethics because somebody could be totally virtuous and
What if you look back at like Dr. Kevorkian, the Dr. Death? He was doing what he thought was virtually right. He was helping terminally ill patients end their life. And And he thought what he was doing was right, other than that they were suffering.
Yes, that's utilitarian ethics, Jenny. That's saying, what can I do to minimize suffering? And if that patient has decided, I have autonomy over my body and I want to end the suffering, I think utilitarianism could justify Dr. Kevorkian's acts. He's minimizing suffering. I've had people that have had to put their dog down or their cat down because the dog or the cat had cancer, right? And the animal was in pain. And the way to reduce the suffering was, to let them go. And I think that would be explained by utilitarian ethics, minimizing suffering. And now there's laws, like Oregon has a right to die law, and that would go along with Dr. Kevorkian. Now, I think the Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, has identified a right to die, to choose to end your life if you have a terminal illness. But virtue ethics can't solve that question. We'd have to appeal to another moral theory, utilitarianism, duty-based ethics. So I see that. I see that virtue ethics is not always practical, just rather an idea of being just. Okay, thank you for those comments, Jenny, and those insights. So, just a reminder, you do have a live session question this week, and your question is, what is the golden mean? Let's quickly move on to Buddhism. I know we only have 10 minutes left, so I'm going to do Buddhism very quickly. Okay. So Buddhism is the first Eastern theory that we're looking at. Buddhism originated in India. Again, it was around the time of Socrates, 500 BC. The Buddha grew up as a prince. His father tried to keep him from experiencing any suffering. He lived a very wealthy life, but the Buddha wasn't happy with that. So he decided to give up his princely life to help reduce the suffering of others. And there are some wealthy people who do that. They give up their chance to be royal or to be, very rich because they become concerned with overall society and trying to help other people. So the Buddha gave up his future of being king to find a way to overcome suffering. So out of Buddhism, we get a summary of ideas. One of them is enlightenment, nirvana, which is very similar to achieving eudaimonia, karma, and we know what karma is. Karma is that natural law of universal causal relationships. And it's actually Newton's third law of physics. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. According to Buddha, by acting morally, we generate good karma. And that leads us closer to our goals. By acting immorally, we generate bad karma and takes us away from our goals. And so that's considered to be a universal law. It does have some explanation in physics because, again, for any action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So if you put out energy into the universe, maybe it's positive energy, then that positive energy may come back to you, and that brings things back, to that original balance. If you put out negative energy might come back to you. And that's the idea of karma. So there is some sort of justification for that, but it's fundamental in Buddhism. Good karma is generated by acting skillfully. Bad karma is generated by acting unskillfully. And I think one way that you could apply this to professional ethics, I think of a nurse. If a nurse acts very skillfully in his or her treatment of the patient gets well, right? But if the nurse acts unskillfully, ignores the patient's need, doesn't give the patient their medicine, doesn't give the patient their bath, doesn't give the patient their food, is the patient going to get better? What do you think, Barbara?
Oh, no, they won't.
Right. So it's interesting that you can actually apply this law of karma to professional ethics. If an accountant does his or her work skillfully on behalf of a corporation, then the corporation's books and the corporation's will be correctly valued. Their stock will be correctly valued. But if an accountant is cutting corners, being dishonest, then the corporation's books will be off, and there could be all sorts of negative impact for investors. So, there's this idea of karma and this notion of Buddhism could actually really apply to professional ethics. If a lawyer acts unskillfully, screws up a client's case, they're going to get sued for malpractice, right? But if a lawyer acts skillfully and does the client's business transactions properly, the client's business can be very successful and the lawyer gets paid. So I really think that there is something to this idea of karma as being a good virtue. Let's talk about the core of Buddhism, which is to be on the path to enlightenment, similar to Aristotle's notion of achieving eudaimonia and human beings being teleological. For the Buddhists, it's to be on the path to enlightenment. And that has three parts. One is wisdom, and then meditation and morality. Each must be practiced well, and although they're distinct parts, they're complementary. The better you meditate, the clearer your mind will be to receive wisdom. The more wisdom you have, the better you are able to make good choices. And the clearer your mind will be for meditation. So those are the three parts of the path to enlightenment: wisdom, meditation, and then behaving morally. There are 5 core fundamental rules that you must follow to follow Buddhism. One is to abstain from harm, abstain from stealing, abstain from the misuse of sensual pleasures, abstain from lying, and abstain from intoxicants that cloud the mind. And abstaining from those things is a way to create good karma. Buddhists believe in loving kindness, which is a feeling of happiness for all human beings, warding off hatred and fear. Conquer anger by loving kindness. To be expressed to all beings like a mother's love for her child. Practice kindness every day by kind actions directed toward others. Harmlessness. Life is sacred. According to the Buddhists, the intentional destruction of life is wrong. In fact, the traditional Buddhist used to do animal sacrifices, but then they moved away from that because they saw that as being cruel to the animals. So now they do more traditional Indian religions have a symbolic offering, such as food or milk. That way, they're not harming the animals like they used to. They used to do animal sacrifices. Some monks actually use a strainer to avoid harming small animals in their drinking water. Who wants small animals in their drinking water? So I drank this bottled water. It's been through reverse osmosis. There are no small animals in this water. But yes, you could think about a time, 500 BC when, yeah, the water may have had something small floating around in it. You still had to drink it. But monks would use a strainer because they don't want to hurt whatever animals are in their water. Now we have purified water like this. We don't have to worry about that. In some cultures, agriculture is unacceptable because it's considered raping the ground. Have you ever heard that? When you overcrop, overplant, overuse land, it takes so much out of the land that then maybe the next season you can't grow any crops on it. So in certain cultures, agriculture will be unacceptable. And the way that translates into America is that the government actually provides farm subsidies, and it will pay farmers not to grow crops because maybe in a certain year the crops are not needed. So rather than having them rape the ground, so to speak, and then destroy the crops, the government actually pays farmers farm subsidies so that they will not grow that particular season. and they'll wait until that food is needed, and then they'll grow another year instead, and then harvest and sell. So harmlessness. So ultimately, a Sanskrit is an enlightened being. So if you hear somebody talk about Sanskrit in Buddhism, that's an enlightened being. In early Buddhism, it is used to refer to the Buddha before he attains the supreme enlightenment. He's a Sanskrit. A Sanskrit would also be any person who's destined on the path to enlightenment. The Bodhisattva is central to the teaching of the Mahayan Buddhism. One becomes a Bodhisattva by arousing the mind of enlightenment. The Bodhisattva does not leave suffering, which is samsara, until all beings are saved. So again, that's a really deep concept. It's very communal, right? Because Buddhism is not just focused on me and my ego and my needs. Buddhism says that the Bodhisattva will not achieve supreme enlightenment until all human beings are safe from suffering. So, how did the Buddha find his path? Well, in order to overcome suffering, the Buddha searched and searched. He lived a very frugal life. He went around from place to place. He refrained from the use of worldly goods. He practiced an extreme level of fasting. He almost died of starvation. One day, he accepted a bowl of rice offered to him by a young girl, and he realized that fasting was not the path that he was looking for. And then he went into a deep meditation, and then in this meditation, he finds the path. The path is known as the middle way, similar to Aristotle's golden mean. So in Buddhism, it's called the middle way, and it is the path between two extremes of luxury and asceticism. So, Buddhism has some interesting concepts in it. Any comments, questions? Let's talk about your Module 3 assignments, going from theory to the more practical and tangible. So we have a discussion forum where everyone is presenting a reflection of their life that highlights your view of living 99 years of flourishing. You want to submit the correct answer to the live session question, which is, what is the golden mean according to Aristotle? And then we have a written assignment. It is asking you to create a one-page help wanted ad for an entry-level marketing position. So this is going to be a fun assignment, and I'm going to share with you how another student did their help wanted ad. This is a document that can be created in Microsoft Word. You want it to actually look like an ad. And you want your ad to describe the job. You want it to be an entry-level marketing position for an ad firm called Add It Up. You want to follow the directions that are listed in the assignment, and you don't really want to change anything too much. You want to include the 5 virtues that the ideal applicant should have. Can everyone see this ad that I'm sharing? This is one that another student did. So it needs to have a bold, attention-grabbing title, and it's called Add It Up Marketing Firm. Add It Up Marketing Firm is currently seeking entry-level marketing professionals to join our team. And it's got pretty pictures and clip art to make it look professional. And this student has a description of the job: developing pricing strategies for products to be marketed, planning, coordinating marketing events. And then it has the requirements. It says that the ideal applicant must be punctual, reliable, responsible, compassionate, honest. They have to have courage. So there's their 5 ideal virtues that the job applicant has. And then it tells you how to apply for the job. Submit your resume and cover letter to kdove@additupmarketing.com. So this is just one example of how you could create an eye-catching help wanted ad. but the whole thing can be created. Some students, I think, use a Microsoft Publisher, but you can actually do the whole thing in Microsoft Word just by inserting pictures and clip art. Any questions about how to do this?
Could we also do it like in a PDF form?
Sure,
Okay.
absolutely. I don't usually do things in Adobe, so I don't know how that would work. I do know how to convert a Word file to Adobe. I know how to convert a PDF to Word, but yes, you can do it in a PDF is fine. I think it's a fun assignment because it allows you to be creative, and you don't need any APA or anything like that. You know, just be creative and create a help wanted ad for an entry-level marketing position. Okay, any questions, Jenny or Barbara?
Nope.
I'm okay.
Excellent. So thank you so much for attending the Module 3 live session. And everyone, just be sure to submit your answer to the live session question by Sunday, February 27th. March is just around the corner, coming in like a lion, a very cold lion.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Barbara, for your participation. Thanks, Jenny, for attending.
Have a good
Good night.
Yes,
Thank you. Have a good night. Take care. Stay warm.
I'll try.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
You're welcome.